Okay, so let's discuss parameters and arguments. So in our last lecture or our last section, we actually discussed the what methods and variables are in programming. So now what we need to know is we need to actually study and we need to understand what parameters and arguments are in methods. So sometimes we may have a method such as a private, void, and we need a method called getTuna, right? So sometimes we have methods that need things or stuff to do its job, right? So for example, let's change this to actually make tuna. We'll change this to make tuna. For example, if we were to make a tuna fish sandwich, we'll first need to get the sandwich bread, right? So we'll need to pass, the sandwich bread into the argument list. And next we'll need the tuna fish itself. We'll need bread. We'll need mayo, whatever else. I'm not really sure how to make tuna fish exactly, but those are some of the things you'll need. Maybe onions, whatever else you want to put in it. You need to pass that to the make tuna so it can do its job. So let's go ahead and give you an example of what this means. So let's say we had a method called get average, right? So we have good average, and to get the average, we need to have two numbers passed, or we just do three numbers. We need three numbers given to our get average method so it can actually calculate the average. So to pass a argument, you need to first lay out the parameters. And a good way to know what's a parameter and what's a argument is parameters are what a method needs to do its job, and an argument is what you give it to do its job. For example, say if we pass, so for this method get average, we'll need an integer, and we'll just call it num1, and then we'll need int2. We'll need another integer because we need three integers, and we'll name that num2, and then we have another integer, and we'll name that num3. So now we've declared the parameters necessary for the get average method to do its job. So now what we can do is we can actually write our formula or our algorithm inside this method. So to get the average is pretty simple. We could just do int average equals, and we'll put this in parentheses. So the parentheses is always first, as you please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, parentheses first. We'll do num1 plus num2 plus num3 and divide by 3, and that will give us our average. So now what happens is that we put that in parentheses because order of operations, because we want that to execute first and then we want division to go next. So now what we can do is now we can just go ahead and call this method from our main function. We can go ahead and just do get average, and we can pass it whatever numbers we want. We could do 100, 200, 400, and our method will now type error, change that to static. There we go. All right, cool. So now we have our method, and we can call it here. You see, we say get average 100. We pass it the arguments of 100, 200, and 400. Now these, you want to say, oh, well, those are parameters. Well, no. The only time you'll see parameters are in function or method headers, or where you actually declare your method. So here, all of these will be our parameters because this is what we need in our method to do its job. The arguments are what you give it to do its job. So for get average, you give it 100, 200, and 400. Those will all be arguments, and they're passed for that method to do its job. So now what we can do is we can go and just run this. We can actually just add a print line statement so we can see the answer to make sure it works correctly. Print out dot print line, and we can do the average is, and then we can just blank space, and then we can just add our average variable, which is here. We just add the average variable there, And now let's go ahead and run it, and let's look in our console and see what we got. There it is. The average is 233. Bingo. So now you know basically the basic fundamentals of parameters and arguments, and how to specifically give a method parameters necessary for it to do its job. You could also change this to float. You could do floats. You can pass it whatever object you need. You could do floats. I mean, we could do whatever numbers we wanted to do. We could do booleans. We could pass it booleans. We can simply pass it doubles. We can pass it anything, strings, any object that you can manipulate in Java, such as any type of object type, pretty much. You can pass it as you can give it as a parameter and pass it as an argument. So that's the basics of parameters and arguments.